So welcome everybody. You are in the BCIs Workshop right now. My name is Marion Bernstein. I run communications for NYC Media Lab, and I will be your moderator for this workshop. So like I said, you are in the BCIs Workshop, and today we will hear from Ramses Alcade, who is the CEO and co-founder at Neurable. Ramses Alcade is an electrical engineer, neuroscientist, previous CEO of Faro LLC, and current CEO of Neurable. At Faro, he managed health projects for universities and clients. As a researcher, he developed brain-computer interfaces and signal processing pipelines. At Neurable, he's hyper-focused on making brain-computer interfaces an everyday device. He holds a bachelor's degree in electrical and electronics engineering, a master of science, and a doctor of philosophy in neuroscience from the University of Michigan. And before I pass the virtual mic over to Ramses, I'll just remind everybody the flow of today's workshop is we'll have roughly 30 minutes or so for Ramses to present Neurable, and then the last 15 minutes or so of the workshop will be reserved for audience Q&A. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the audience Q&A box or the chat box, and then Autumn and I will read those questions aloud to Ramses at the end of the workshop. So with that, I will pass the mic over to Ramses. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here today. So we're going to have a really fun workshop. It's going to be a little bit involved with all of you here. So my expectations is that you're using the chat, asking a lot of questions. There's a few questions that I have for everyone as we go through as well too. And then I have a demo to show everyone also, which those are always fun. And we'll see how live demos go. So let me just share my screen real quick. Awesome. So today, I'm really going to talk about a few key things. First, I'm going to go over a little bit about the company, what we do. And then after that, I'm going to talk about the two core things. How do we make brain-computer interfaces every day? That's really key because it's something that people have been trying to do for the last 10 years with innovators, early innovators like Emotive and Muse, but they still haven't reached mainstream. And we all here really believe that this technology can impact the world significantly. But why hasn't it really done that? And that's been a huge thesis of what we work on at Neurable. So just to start things off here at Neurable, we were founded in 2016 at the University of Michigan. So what we worked on there is a signal processing system. Essentially, we take brain signal, we apply AI onto it in order to give cleaner brain signal on the output. Brain signals tend to be incredibly noisy. And so by cleaning all that data up, we're essentially able to allow an individual to do more with it. And at the University of Michigan, we actually worked with people who had cerebral palsy and ALS. And it used to take about sometimes 1 to 5 minutes to get a yes or no response from them on a test. And with our pipeline, we were able to reduce that down to just 1 minute, which is a huge improvement for their quality of life. Imagine you're 8 years old. You got to see if the doctor wants to know if you're cognitively able enough to benefit from physical therapy, but it takes you 5 minutes and you have to wear this goopy gel cap to make it work. Like, that's a nightmare, right? And so that was really one of the big problems that we solved there. And then we said, wow, we got something incredible here, something that could allow us to go from these crazy gel cap systems in laboratory settings to an everyday system. And that's really what started out the pathway of Neurable when we spun out from the University of Michigan. And so I'm going to talk about two key parts of the story. The first one is the customers, how we started with a customer-first mentality. And then second of all, how do you build a product that is for people using deep tech? And that's something that is really, really like a missing key in a lot of companies. You'll see a lot of these deep tech companies, but they're not for humans, right? They're for like engineers. They're for people who think it's cool and rad, but it doesn't scale. So how do we make it scale? And really the first step toward doing that is understanding that the customer is always first. How do you make technology that's universally accessible? And thus far, there's been so much incredible work, ambitious efforts on this tough technology, and we all know that there's a huge opportunity. And so before I move forward, for those of you on, I want to ask all of you, what applications and use cases you've seen brain-computer interfaces be used primarily in the consumer space? So go ahead, just send some stuff through the chat window. Yes, I will repeat. What use cases have we seen for brain-computer interfaces in the consumer space? Cool. Those are some great responses. And some of you are not necessarily wrong. There isn't a lot. There is some iWriter systems that are out there. They're not really consumer. They're really meant for medical applications. There's companies like Muse where you see them for meditation. And that's really kind of the 4 areas that we've seen them as well too, which is like meditation, for sleep. So monitoring your sleep, lucid dreamings, et cetera, et cetera. Hackers. So you have groups like OpenBCI, which is actually a New York-based company. You can buy them, you can build some cool applications, and then focus. So helping people, get focused on the tasks that they're doing. And for these applications, if you look at the form factors, they're pretty crazy, right? You've got like either bands that you wear on your head that it's not something you would typically wear every single day. Or you have these like large systems that are, you wouldn't necessarily walk around and try to use. And we've even been guilty of this as well too. This one right here that's connected to a virtual reality system is actually one of ours right here. So really, we've seen a few different capabilities as well too. We've seen individuals who want to use consumer brain-computer interfaces for measuring, so measuring brain activity. Others have been using it for control, so grabbing objects, controlling objects. That was one of the works that we did. And the last one is stimulating. What if either through auditory or through electrical stimulating, why don't we help people change their state or the way that they learn in order to help them optimize? And the reason that these have been the key areas that we've seen them is because there's a significant level of applications across the board, from the future of work. And what's crazy is we're all living the future of work right now. The fact that this event is virtual is the future of work. COVID accelerated hybrid environments. COVID accelerated video conferencing to a level that we've never seen before. The future of work is actually right now. And that's the crazy thing about it. Education, how can we understand if a student is focused or unfocused? How do we help them get better tests? How do we democratize learning at a high rate with some of the best teachers in the world? What about sleep? It's one of the biggest problems for professionals. And I'm sure at least half of the people on this entire call have sleep issues. We all have creative minds. We're all working all the time. And on top of that is health monitoring, wellness, health, all of that is becoming important, work-life balance. And then lastly is performance enhancements. Brain-computer interfaces have the ability to tackle every single one of these areas and provide a rich future for everyone. And the main issue is, why is there no ubiquitous brain-computer interface? And so I asked that to everyone here. Use the chat window. Why do you think there isn't a ubiquitous brain-computer interface, a system that is as ubiquitous as your cell phone right now? Yeah, that's a good one. Hardware is expensive. Any other ones? Hardware is bulky. Okay. Wow, these are some great suggestions. Yeah, privacy legislation, that's pretty big. Yeah, everyday use cases. Oh, that's a great one from Alizarin. Possibly not trendy looking, Google Glass. So we actually did a survey of about 1,000 people, and we also did a ton of work with trying to understand this question. Why is there no ubiquitous brain-computer interface? And we actually came to 5 key areas that we identified as the biggest blockers of making this technology an everyday system. One is function. Most of the consumer brain-computer interfaces just don't work. There are some of them that we bought a ton of them. Sometimes we even put them on a table and just let them record data, and it said, you're meditating really well, right? And so you can see how that would break customer trust if the device isn't even able to work by itself, or when you put it on, it provides you feedback that is incorrect. Next one is cost, societal fit, comfort, and user experience. I'm going to dive into each one of these a little bit, starting with what I think is the most significant one that has prevented any type of consumer ubiquitous use, and that is function. The majority of the people that we spoke to told us that they bought XYZ consumer level device or research device, and it just didn't work. They put it on, they tried to type with it, they tried to meditate with it, they tried to do all these other applications with it. But the problem was that they were not able to see a one-to-one correlation consistently with the product. And that is so key, because imagine you bought a keyboard and less than half the time when you clicked on a key, it didn't type that key out. Like, you'd throw that keyboard away. You'd call them up and you say, this thing doesn't work, and you'd want a refund back. And that's the state of where a lot of brain-computer interfaces are at right now. The next one is cost. In order to get a brain-computer interface that functions well, you have to buy a research level kit. And these things can cost up to close to $20,000. And it's just something that is not accessible for an everyday user. Societal fit. When most people think about brain-computer interfaces, they either think about invasive chips, something that they're afraid of, or how is it going to look, things like that. And so in society, there's still a lot of education that needs to be done about brain-computer interfaces. When we think about something like an invasive system, something that requires surgery, that's more akin to getting like a prosthetic leg, versus a consumer system is more akin to buying a pair of shoes. Right? Pairs of shoes and prosthetics leg both provide value to people. There's a reason that you always have a pair of shoes, right? But you only get a prosthetic leg if something went wrong, right? Like, if you're a quadriplegic, you would get a brain chip, right? But if you're not a quadriplegic, you wouldn't need that type of technology. You could just talk, or you could just use your technology. And then on top of that is comfort. We've seen a lot of form factors where they have like headphones or all these other kinds of systems as well too. But we found out that anything that looks like a spike, consumers just don't even want to touch it. It was really crazy. We actually created a website. We created multiple websites of different products, and we had people go to them. And some of them had headphones or earbuds, and some of the headphones had little spiky electrodes, and they even said like, these are soft and rubber, like, they don't hurt, et cetera, et cetera. And it literally, people just did not want anything to do with them. They thought like, what happens if I fall down? Will they stab me? Right? And it's like, no, these are made out of rubber. Like they'll just bend. Right? But these are the kinds of things that people are looking for their technology. They want it to look like an everyday device. They want it to be as easy to use as an everyday device, and they want to be able to use it all day long. And then lastly is the user experience, which is right now, the UX UI, the user experience of brain-computer interfaces is rough. You put it on, you don't know if it works all the time. You have to figure out how to connect it. It's not seamless. And so these are the kinds of things that really prevent this technology from scaling. So on our mission, we decided that we wanted to solve these problems. At least when it came to performance side, the work that we've done at the University of Michigan enabled us to really tackle that. And so what we wanted to tackle was the other four. And to really understand that, we had to come up with this mentality of the product is for the user, right? It's not for us, right? It's not for, like, if it was for me, it would have sensors all over the band with spikes everywhere that easily go through hair. It'd cover multiple regions of the brain to make sure that I'm getting the best data possible. Like, we'd use gel like that. I'm a scientist. That's what I want. But humans don't want that, right? Like, that's just not going to work. And so to solve that, one of the key things is that the form factors have to change. This is that virtual reality system that we showed off in the past in 2017. And what was really cool is you could put on this VR system and you essentially had telekinesis. It was so cool. You could go through and escape the room, grab objects, click on keyboards, do really cool stuff. But we tried it, for example, on an individual with ALS, and they were like, this system is way too heavy. Like, I can't even hold my head up, right? And you look at these old VR systems, and they look archaic at this time. Now, if you look at like the Oculus, all-in-one systems, right? They have cables going everywhere, etc. So things have to change. And so we went on a journey toward improving the signal processing of the technology so that we could go into smaller form factors. And that's really what we did over the last 10 years of development here at the company. In 2011 to 2015, we went from these large cap gel systems to a dry system. So it didn't require any gel whatsoever. That's a huge go, no-go for consumers. And then during the last 5 years where we've been venture-backed, we've gone from these large headsets all the way down to essentially a pair of headphones. I'm using one of our older prototypes right now so I can show you all some demos. But the main goal has been, how do we make this an everyday system while still retaining good performance, right? And that's really key. And it took a lot of work, tons of evolution. You can see we had this first system in the upper left. Those are actually giant electrodes with, they're spiky electrodes as well too. And that's when we learned consumers don't want anything to do with spiky electrodes. But through this evolution, we eventually went to cloth. And cloth represented a lot of challenges. You lose signal. You have to make sure you find areas where there isn't hair, so behind the ear, for example. And all of these challenges we had to work in order to make it work as seamlessly as possible, including the fact that we have so many sensors on here is so that if a person puts on these headphones differently every time, it still finds an area where there's good signal and is able to give them a working product. And these are all the user experience steps that companies need to go for in order to really create a product that works. And like I said, we did tons of market discovery, testing, and research in order to really understand the personas, the price points, the value propositions, etc. And we also, from that, learned what are some of the key needs that people have for early brain-computer interfaces. And what we learned is that individuals really were at just the beginning step of how brain-computer interfaces can evolve for the world. So think about what were the first types of sensors that you used. It was like something like Fitbit usually, or Whoop, or some other application like that you wear. And essentially the first step in really getting this technology out there is to create essentially a Fitbit for your brain. People wanted to quantify their cognitive health, to make better decisions for themselves, to say like, this is when I'm focused, this is when I'm not focused, these are the things that are impacting my focus. And then how do I balance my life and my family? How do I allow myself to be more productive while feeling less burnt out? And we found that burnout was an incredible area too, especially with parents. A lot of these individuals are working remote. There's kids running around background. It's crazy. Some of us ended up working from home and it became easier and there's less time commuting. Other people ended up working from home and now you got to deal with family and kids running around and like dogs barking and like life just got harder. Like, that's crazy. And this is how life is going to be moving toward over time as companies realize that offices aren't really as needed as they used to be. And so we decided, hey, why don't we target a product that really helps solve these problems and really understand the individuals who are affected by this. And we ended up finding 3 kinds of individuals. The first one is Quant Optimizers, people who just want to understand themselves more, who quantify their day, who said, in the case of Fitbit is, did I walk enough today or did I not walk enough today? Now, note that for a lot of the people on this call, that seems like very basic data. A lot of people on this call might say like, oh, I want to know if like how music affects me during the day, or how, if I ate X versus Y, like all these kinds of mini experiments is not what consumers are looking for. They're looking for something as simple as, did I walk enough or not, right? That's what the 10,000 steps was for Fitbit. It wasn't actually something scientific that they decided on. It just meant you moved or you didn't move enough, right? Focus improvers, people who want to understand where they can improve their focus, how distractors are impacting them. And then time maximizers, people who want to just figure out how to maximize their time so they can go home, spend time with family, etc. And so we created a series of value propositions. The first one was understanding burnout. We used an algorithm that was done in collaboration with Dr. Ali Yousefi when he was at Harvard. He had done this technology invasively, and we repeated the study non-invasively. And we were essentially able to predict an individual's reaction time. And that is tied to attention. And so by looking at this measure for attention in brain data, we were able to create a system that enabled us to understand when a person was burning out and telling them to take breaks. And what I think is super cool about this is the following, which is there's two ways to end your day, right? You either crush it and you get to the end of the day and you're like, wow, I just worked 12 hours and I feel amazing and I feel so motivated and I love my job, right? And then the other way is, wow, I just worked 10 hours. I hate my job. I hate everybody there. Like, it's exhausting. Why am I putting in so many hours and not feeling enjoyment? And really, one of the key differences, it's not the only difference. Obviously, if you have a crappy manager, like, you're going to have a crappy experience, right? But one of the key things is whether you take breaks or not, surprisingly, right? If you take breaks the right time during the day, you'll come back with new energy, with new ideas. And every single time you bring those new ideas and that new energy back, it actually creates dopamine, right? And so you end your day feeling accomplished. You actually end up working 10-hour days because you feel excited about what you're doing, not because you feel like you need to get it done, right? And so how do we create these moments for people? I'm not saying that we should all work 10-hour days. I'm just saying, like, how do we at least create enjoyment out of the work that you do, passion for what you do? And the next thing we wanted to do is, okay, what are the biggest things that prevent people from really enjoying their work? It's actually distractions, all those Slack notifications. I don't know if some of you have like Apple Watches. I don't wear mine anymore. It sucks. Like, I hate getting buzzed in the arm every like 5 minutes about some other thing. It just creates stress. And we've actually seen that in individuals as well too. You know, their cortisol goes up as all these notifications come in. So what if there was a way that you could essentially put on a pair of headphones? We'd be able to detect when you're going into focus, and your computer automatically went into do not disturb mode, right? And it started playing music that helped you maintain your focus for longer. And this creates moments of enjoyment for work. And then the last thing, as we started working with these individuals, is understanding focus. And what type of music or media increases an individual's focus. People don't necessarily want to be forced to listen to specific music. They want to listen to the music they love while they're working. But there's some music that actually helps you focus more versus worse. And so we basically found these 3 value propositions, and we built a ton of technology in order to be able to deliver these. So, what I kind of just want to highlight real quick is we went from something like this, to essentially getting it down to a pair of headphones that really hits on some key value propositions. And I'm going to show you here just a quick video of the demo of some of the tech of the tech itself.
Neurable's brainwave sensing technology measures the effect of distractions on your productivity. Neurable's headphone prototype, N10, has integrated fabric sensors, or EEG, electroencephalography sensors. When the sensors touch your skin around the ear, they measure electrical signals produced by your brain. And Neurable software determines if you're in the zone, focused on something, or not so much. In this demonstration, James is going to do something called a Stroop Task to help him focus. The Stroop Task measures cognitive performance by putting your brain through a challenge involving matching colors. When the word blue is written in red ink, James will respond with the key press red. It's challenging for your brain, so you'll need to focus. James starts by talking to get a baseline measurement. When he's talking, he's not so focused. Next, he'll focus on the task for a few minutes. Neurable's technology can plot your focus in real time, as seen on the data plot. When the blue line is low, James is not focused. When the blue line is high, James is focused. After more talking, James returns to the task, but this time he is distracted by questions on the computer screen, like a text or a Slack notification that interrupt his focus. Each time he is distracted, his focus drops, and it takes 10 to 15 seconds to recover. Each of these distractions, like those text messages or Slack notifications, will cause James to lose focus. Oh wait, here's another one. When James is finished, we can clearly see the difference between his focus with distractions and without distractions. This demonstration illustrates how Neurable's technology can show the effect of distractions in real time. Neurable, focus on what matters most. Distractions matters most.
I think what's really cool though too is I'm just going to show this graph real quick.
Demonstration illustrates how Neurable's,
because I think it really shows off what we can do with the tech real quick. So you can see here to the left, on average, these spikes are higher up, which represents that his focus was maintained. And essentially what we did is we turned out do not disturb automatically on his headphones and then blocked out all the other notifications that came in. And then when we turn that off, you can see his brain essentially with all the distractions coming in. And every single time there's like a red ping here, those are distractors that we added ourselves. And you can see that there's a drop in productivity that happens for James as well too. Cool. So now I'm going to talk to you all about something else, which is we love our tech here, and we're known for pushing the boundaries of what signal processing can do on the brain. And so we can also do a lot of next generation controls with our technology. And if some of you have been astute, you've noticed that sometimes I've had my hands up here. And the reason for that is I've actually been controlling these slides using my headphones. And so I'll show you all real quick. So that's what we mean by next generation brain computer interfaces. Something that is seamless, no false positives, things just work, you put them on. You can put them on a little differently every single time, they just work. And this is what we can do when we bring deep technology into an everyday product that is seamless. And we can't just do this with headphones, we can do it with earbuds. You can imagine the future where you have AR glasses and you can just put them on and they essentially seamlessly let you control your technology. And that's really the work that we've been doing here at Neurable. We've been focused on how do you make deep tech a human product. And so with that, I'll open things up for questions and thoughts. The only thing that I'll say on top of this is that if you want to learn more about the science, I'm happy to jump into that as well too. We also have a white paper available on our website. We love to be as transparent as possible. We have our own Discord as well. So go check that out, and happy to continue the conversations.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ramses. That was fascinating. Audience members, if anyone has burning questions or further comments, please feel free to type them into the chat box that you've been using on the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. I actually have a bit of a silly question to kick things off. Ramses, when you were controlling those slides with your brain, what were you thinking? What was your thought?
Well, what's really cool is that just like your finger has the ability to click, essentially there's muscles around your head that activate whenever you want to do an action. And so we're able to pick up those, we're able to pick up a combination of brain and muscle signals and then use those essentially as a form of mouse click. And we have another system too that is even cooler than this one that we're going to be revealing pretty soon, where it's essentially like using Siri, but it doesn't require you to use your voice. So there's going to be a lot of really cool tech that comes out with it. That last one that I showed is more just because I think it's cool. But yeah, that's the kind of work that you can start to build when you have good usable EEG signal.
Very cool. So we have one question here in the chat from participant Michael Grabowski. Michael says, how intentional do you have to be to make the gestures work? How do you control accidental gestures?
Yeah, that's a great question. We get that all the time. What's really key is that your brain is very good at deciding whether something's volitional or not. And the best way of describing that is imagine grabbing an object. You don't actually need to grab it, right? You can just, if you imagine it, the muscles in your arm are still active that would be responsible for that action. And that's where mental imagery of like activities, and they use that a lot for athletes, comes in about. They basically imagine what they're going to be doing and it activates those neurons. But there is a gate essentially that in your brain that prevents you from actually doing that task volitionally. And a lot of the work that we did in 2010 was really understanding what that gate was and making sure that we apply that to anything moving forward. And so it's something that that's been well studied in the academic research, and that's where a lot of those type to spell systems, they actually leverage that volitional aspect of your brain to prevent activations.
I had a question for you. So I know that with epilepsy patients, they often have to, pardon me, go through like 3-day long EEGs, and they put the electrodes on your head, wrap you up, send you home, and it's a big hassle. Can you see these headphones being implemented to perform that job as well in the future?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess one thing I want to address too is we're not a headphone company. We're definitely a signal processing company.
Yeah.
So we see ourselves putting this technology into every single headphone. As ubiquitous as Bluetooth is, that's how neurotech is going to be in hearables. And so I can imagine somebody, your doctor saying like, hey, go buy, the Bose Brain Tech headphones, download this app, and then just use them as you would during the day. And actually, over the next month, you're going to be using them as your neural pair of headphones, but you're going to get all this cognitive information. And if you're an epilepsy patient, you'll be able to essentially track your brain activity throughout the day. And there's so many scientific questions that are yet to be understood, because a person going once a month to an EEG clinic, that's considered a lot of EEG data, right? But in the future, if we make this as ubiquitous as something like an accelerometer that you use for Fitbit or any of these other devices, or heart rate variability sensor, you can really start to track things like how medication impacts a person, how dementia changes over time, how epilepsy affects an individual. And that's a really key part of the value of the technology, finding and discovering these feedback markers over long periods of time.
Another question I had, going back to the feeling of burnout. So brain activity wise, what's actually happening in our brain when we reach burnout, true burnout?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So what we found out is we actually created a model of the brain and attention. And that model, we think of it akin to a glass of water, right? So imagine the glass. That's how much capability your brain has to do per day, right? And as you do more tasks, the water in the glass fills, right? And if you do a task and it's too hard or it's too mentally demanding, the water will overflow and you get a mess everywhere, essentially, right? And so in order to keep people in a great state of work, you need to keep essentially that glass more than half full, but not overflowing. And that creates an enjoyable task where people are in the zone, et cetera, et cetera. The longer you work, the glass starts to shrink in size. So even though you're still doing the same amount of work, the chance of it overflowing increases. And so by providing good breaks, it allows us to recover some of that, glass size, so that we can continue enjoying the work that we do. And the way that it looks like neuroscientifically is that you can look at how the frontal lobe is actually regulating different activities across your brain. For example, if you're doing a visual task, it'll increase the activations that happen in your visual centers, like your occipital lobe. And as you start to see that regulation become weaker and weaker, but the task still maintains its difficulty, you're going to get burnout, you're going to get overflow. And so it's really understanding how that dynamic organism of your brain works that enables us to really create solutions that solve these problems.
Wow, yeah. The glass of water is a really great analogy. Thank you for that. We have a comment here from Maria in the audience, and Ramses, maybe I'll read this comment and maybe you can add to it or address it.
Sure.
Maria says, fascinating tech, thank you. It may be embraced for the wrong reasons, as the worship of productivity and efficiency leads to further enslavement of workers. Very true, and something I was thinking about as well. I imagine employers evaluating workers' value. If you experience less burnout, you are more valued.
That's an amazing question. So like A+ to Maria for asking that. Yeah, and that's actually something really key that we think about as well too. And our perspective at Neurable is that this technology is to empower people, not corporations, right? And so, you know, what we like, for example, we're talking to a few companies right now that want to use our tech, and what we've told them is the way that it's going to work is, and this is actually good for your company too, is you don't put these headphones on to monitor people and see if they're productive. You give these headphones to people, or you give whatever, you know, earbuds that have our technology in it to individuals in order for them to better understand themselves, and they have the capability to take them off at any time, so that you know, they retain their own privacy anytime that they want. But then they can see during the day and say like, oh wow, you know, like maybe I need to create a 3-hour buffer during the day where I don't have calls in order to get my work done, right? That is actually going to allow me to do what typically would take me 5 hours worth of work to do it in 2. And then I can go home and spend time with my family and enjoy my life, right? So how do we empower people? And that's really, and to Maria's point, that's really key. And that's why making sure that you work with and that you understand as a company that you have that responsibility, and that's how you're planning to make the work that you do move forward. That's super key, and that's really, really important to what we do here at Neurable.
Well said. I think along the lines of burnout, how has COVID impacted your research? Have you been hearing tenfold these cases of burnout, and do you have people beating down your door to be studied?
Yeah, it's you know, it's been dramatic. You know, individuals are less satisfied with their work, and part of the reason why is because you're mixing work and home together. You know, there's this great study where they basically told people that anytime you study, you should turn on a light, and then when you stop studying, turn it off. And so people thought that the light was something that helped them focus or something like that. You know, maybe there were special, you know, beams of color that were coming into their eyes. And what it really was just an association, right? That I'm working when the light is on, and then my brain is done working when the light is off, right? And that's what happens when you go to an office. But now when you start mixing home and office, all these other issues start to occur. You know, people are working longer than ever because you can now, right? You know, you're not traveling, you're not commuting, et cetera. And so we're starting to see over 50% of individuals that we spoke to are looking for new jobs or burnt out about their current ones. And may not be because they're working necessarily more hours. It's just the way that the work has been happening is significant. And one great example is there was a study by Microsoft that was done recently where they did a conference call and a normal like in-person meeting. And they found that individuals in the conference call were twice as burnt out after the call than in person, because in person, being with people is also part of our socialness, us as animals. So the tools that we're using now are actually more fatiguing than the ones that we were using in the past. And so we're seeing a significant rise in that.
Yeah, the light association is very Pavlovian. That's interesting.
Right.
You may or may not be able to answer this, but I'll ask anyway. How do you gather your consumer feedback? Where do these participants come from? Do you form focus groups?
Yeah, we work with different groups that help us through administering these focus groups, but so I can't say we do it directly, right? We do our own customer discovery. We also, and I'm inviting everyone on this call, we do data collections at our offices all the time. So if you ever want to check out the tech, test it out yourself, provide us feedback, you can just email lab@neurable.com, set up a time, and then come on in, right? And we tend to be an incredibly open company because of some of the stuff that even Maria was talking about, right? How do we empower people? How do we let people feel like they're the ones who are responsible for their destiny, right? And so come here, check out the product, provide your feedback, be a part of the journey, understand the technology, become educated on it, instead of just like getting something and feeling like you have no choice over it.
Noted. lab@neurable.com.
Yep.
Got it. All right. If anyone has any further questions or comments for Ramses, just type them into the chat there. We have a couple more minutes. Ramses, I have a bit of a personal question.
Yeah.
Thanks for putting it in the chat there. Bit of a personal question. So why BCIs? What inspired you to head down this path in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, brain-computer interfaces have been an important part of my life since I was about 8 years old. It really was a personal story. My uncle got into a trucking accident and lost both his legs. And that really motivated me toward how do I create technology that can help individuals in his state. So when I went to the University of Washington, I studied electrical engineering in order to do prosthetics control systems. And that's when I realized that there's this, before we can even get that done well, there's this huge disconnect between the brain and the actual machine. And so that's why I started working in brain-computer interfaces. And when we made that discovery at the University of Michigan, we said, wow, this really has the potential to make this technology ubiquitous. And just like, touchscreens became a ubiquitous technology that used to be an assistive technology in the past, we could do the same thing with brain-computer interfaces if we do this right.
I'd say that's an inspiring note to end on for sure. If anyone else has any further questions, comments, or follow-up in any way, you can email lab@neurable.com. Ramses, thank you so much for joining us today. This was absolutely fascinating. Thank you to the entire Neurable team. Thank you to Autumn, our fantastic comms assistant.